The Bloc Québécois had introduced a bill that called on the government to increase OAS benefits for seniors from 65 to 74. A couple of years ago, the government did increase OAS benefits for seniors 75 and up, saying they were more vulnerable to cost pressures and maybe more in need of some support to deal with cost of living. But the Bloc wanted that extended to all seniors. There was a motion that recently passed the House of Commons that basically calls on the government to pass this bill and implement these changes. That motion did pass, but these changes haven't. So the Bloc has decided, well, enough's enough. The government hasn't moved on this by our deadline, and they're prepared now to move on. But is that something the government should have done? So it at least raises an interesting question. Does OAS, old age security, need to be more generous? When it comes to any sort of government policy to address poverty, whether it's seniors or anybody else, where is that best targeted? And is that the most efficient use of taxpayer dollars if we want to address affordability and poverty and all of these issues? Well, our next guest says it just doesn't make sense to add billions to old age security. He had an op-ed you can find at theglobeandmail.com. Dr. Paul Kershaw is policy professor at UBC and is founder of Generation Squeeze. Paul, great to have you with us here today. Welcome to the program.
Thanks very much for having me.
So what's your read on the likelihood that changes are going to be made to old age security? Does it seem for now maybe that this is off the table?
Well, I think it's off the table that we're just going to have a blanket $16 billion increase to OAS. And to put that in context, the 2024 federal budget is only promising to spend an extra $10 billion on childcare, an extra $6 billion on housing, and $5 billion on post-secondary. So another $16 billion was a huge amount of money. And people should know that OAS is already the biggest part of the budget by far and is growing. It's already scheduled to grow by $71 billion over the next 5 years, regardless of what the Bloc proposal was going to do. And so we just need to remember that the biggest amount of money that the feds are already spending is on OAS. And your listeners should know that you can be a retired couple with a household income of $180,000 and still be getting about $18,000 on top of that from old age security. Mm-hmm. And so to think that we need to add even more public support for retired households with six-figure incomes is a question that we should all be debating. And I think the silver lining to the Bloc putting this on the table is that for the first time in a very long time, people are starting to pay attention to the details of OAS, and even many retirees are saying, hey, we need to redesign this program because there are some seniors who are in poverty, and we could repurpose some of the money going to affluent retirees so that we really eliminate poverty for seniors and then do some important things for our kids and grandchildren.
Right. It's important to note, I mean, we do have other programs. GIS is an example that's more targeted at those on the lower end of the income scale. OAS, it's not completely universal, but I think there is, as you alluded to, a bit of a clawback at the upper echelons of the income scale, but it certainly is not meant to address poverty.
No, it's about 90% of Canadian retirees get OAS, and you'll still be getting some taxpayer-funded benefits when you have a household income over $250,000. Mm-hmm. And let's remember, this is also a group of people who are especially likely to be homeowners and who have likely benefited from rising home values, and it's then being funded by a younger demographic. And our research shows that the typical 35-year-old now in Canada is paying somewhere between 20 and 40% more in income taxes towards boomers in retirement than baby boomers paid when they were young adults back in the day, simply because when boomers were young, there were 7 working-age people for every retiree. Now that boomers are retired, there's only 3 working-age people for every retiree. So it's a much bigger tax burden. I don't want to say caring for our seniors is a burden, but it's a much bigger tax burden to care for today's retirees than it used to be.
Mm-hmm. Noah and Sarah have been trapped miles below the Denver International Airport. They've faced horrors from aliens to human experiments and a shadow government agency hell-bent on their demise. This season on Escaping Denver, the tables turn as the hunted become the hunters, and Noah and Sarah go on the offensive to protect the fate of the world.
I don't think you brought enough men.
I'm not scared!
Then why do you sound scared?
Escaping Denver, Batch 4. Listen on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Some days raising kids feels like no matter what you do, it's the wrong thing. So we created a place for parents to share their terrible and hilarious mistakes with other sleep-deprived parents just like us.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Johnny.
And I'm Shauna. And between us, we have 7 kids, ages 4 to 17. Join us for a brand new season of our podcast, Bad Parents.
This season, you can watch the video version of the podcast as well on YouTube. Search for and follow the Bad Parents podcast wherever you find your podcasts. New episodes every Wednesday.
So your organization, Generation Squeeze, in conjunction with Research Co., you've been doing some surveying on this. So where are Canadians at on this issue?
Yeah, I was delighted to learn that Canadians, and we also pulled especially in Quebec because the Bloc is driving this, so they needed Quebec data, but also retirees. It's about 3/4 of retirees are open to the idea that OAS should actually be eliminated for seniors who have six-figure incomes. And we didn't just talk in generalities. We actually looked at a range of very specific trade-offs. And so let me read you the one that emerged to be the most popular. It said, would you support or not the following? Asking the 20 to 25% of retirees and households with incomes over $100,000 to accept a smaller OAS payment that would reduce their after-tax income by around $3,200. And within Quebec, 70% of respondents supported that idea, as did 74% of Canadians and 76% of people aged 65 and older. And there was no partisan divide. Everyone who voted for a major political party in the last election, over 70% of them, over 70% of Conservatives, Liberals, and NDP voters backed the idea as well. So there's just a huge amount of support to reform OAS at this moment and to effectively ask a more affluent demographic of retirees to accept slightly less OAS so that we can repurpose that funding for a range of other things, including eliminating poverty for seniors.
Is there a fairness issue when it comes to younger generations in terms of, the fact that we've got an aging population, so more and more burden is falling on younger taxpayers, and then on top of that, to vastly expand OAS at the same time?
Oh, this issue is actually the biggest intergenerational tension in the federal budget. And it's not any one person's particular fault here. Like when we did the polling, we started with some just contextual questions. And we said, hey, do you, true or false? People over 65 have the lowest rates of poverty in the country. That actually is factually true, but fewer than 1 in 2 Canadians believe it. And then we said, true or false? Old age security is the biggest part of the federal budget, and it is by a whopping amount. But actually, fewer than 1 in 2 Canadians believe that. And then true or false, are benefits for children and families less generous than they are for retirees? And again, fewer than 1 in 2 Canadians believe that. And all of those things actually are empirically true, beyond contestation. But the story we tell ourselves in Canada hasn't kept up with those facts. And so as a result, we have sort of political instincts by voters giving signals to elected officials who are very sensitive to our instincts, then driving them to say, we should do more later in the life course. But that's what's so beautiful about these polling data. You have a large proportion of Canadians of all ages across all regions, and most notably seniors today, saying, we recognize that there's a better way to do this. And some are even proposing that we model old age security more on the way that we deliver the Canada Child Benefit. So the latter, the Canada Child Benefit, helps families with kids, and it delivers cash support, but it claws it back when household income reaches $79,000. And remember, I said earlier that we claw back OAS when household income for a couple reaches $180,000.
Yeah.
And so retirees and Canadians of all ages are saying, we probably should start to organize OAS so it's much closer in delivering cash in a targeted way like the Canada Child Benefit. And that would save us tens and tens of billions of dollars. And with that money, we could do great things. It would only take $12 billion over the next 5 years, so less than the Bloc was proposing to spend. $12 billion to add an extra $5,000 per year for every one of the 470,000 poor seniors. We could virtually eliminate poverty for seniors for far less money than the Bloc is proposing, and we actually don't need new tax dollars from anybody if we have a more sophisticated clawback process for old age security, so that we ask those who are already affluent to accept slightly less. Now, that is a good trade-off.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. I mean, that also assumes that we keep the retirement age where it is. 65 is where these programs kick in. I know the issue has come up before about maybe with people working longer, even living longer, maybe we raise the retirement age. Is that something we should look at in conjunction with these kinds of reforms?
Oh, that's a brilliant question. And I will fully confess that when former Prime Minister Harper had that plan to delay the age of old age security from 65 to 67, that is something that I and my organization supported publicly quite loudly, because we do need to make adaptations as we are living longer. But as a result of the additional research we've done in response to the Bloc proposal, I've kind of changed my thinking on that, because we modeled what the Prime Minister Harper's former proposal would save. It would save us about $38 billion a year. But we could save exactly the same amount, $38 billion over 5 years. Right. 5 years, let's get that fact right, Paul. Fact check. But you could save about exactly the same amount of money if we change the threshold for old age security down to this $100,000 of household income level, and then it's fully phased out around $150,000 for couples. That would do something really important. It would save the same amount of money, but if you are age 65 and 66 and you're struggling on low income, we'd still continue to have resources there to support you, rather than bluntly asking that group, which is marginalized, there's 6% of seniors who are poor, to endure another 2 years in poverty. I don't want to have poor seniors enduring poverty when it can be prevented. So actually, Mr. Harper's plan, as well-intentioned as it was, actually isn't as good as what has been now being considered, changing the threshold rate. And I will draw attention to the fact that the president of the Canadian Association of Retired Persons, effectively the lobby group for seniors, has also said that his organization is open to rethinking the clawback rate for old age security. And I think that's a lovely gesture of intergenerational solidarity.
Very interesting. Much more on all these survey results and more. It's Gen Squeeze, G-E-N, gensqueeze.ca. Paul Kershaw, thanks so much for joining us here today. Really appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Matlock is a reimagining of the original series. And